wouldn't be able to leave the burning room. What he didn't count on was my will to live, greater than the fire that tried to consume me. The days in the hospital went by. The scars began to form. The doctors said I would need several skin grafts, plastic surgeries, years of treatment. But I knew, from the knowledge my mother had passed on to me, that the herbs I used in secret were accelerating the cure in a way traditional medicine couldn't explain. The nurses began to notice that my wounds were improving faster than normal, even for someone younger. Their curiosity was greater than their skepticism. As I mentioned earlier, Jennifer, that older nurse who had been working there for 30 years, became my lifeline. One night, she caught me applying the ointment. Instead of scolding me, she sat on the edge of the bed and said, "My mother was also a healer. I've never seen anyone recover so fast from burns like this. Teach me that preparation." And so, little by little, the treatment I was doing in secret became almost official, with the silent complicity of the nursing staff, who saw the results and didn't question them. Almost a month after the attack, the police finally began to investigate thoroughly. At first, they had treated it as an accident, a fire caused by a short circuit or a forgotten candle. My daughter was reluctant to believe that her husband would be capable of such cruelty. But the neighbor in the house next door had one of those modern security cameras, the kind that records everything. And in the recording, you could clearly see Richard leaving the house in the middle of the night, shortly before the fire started, and returning minutes later. That footage was the smoking gun she needed, transforming Margaret from a victim into a formidable opponent. But wait until you hear how she orchestrated her return from the dead to catch them completely off guard. The proof that was missing. When Sarah saw the recording, she collapsed. It finally sank in who she had married. A man capable of setting fire to his seven-year-old mother-in-law to take possession of the land and the family businesses. The mask fell completely. The police went after him, but Richard had already disappeared, taking what cash and valuables he could gather. A search of the house revealed more evidence. The gas can hidden in the garage, searches on his computer about how to start a fire and make it look like an accident, and most frightening, a life insurance policy in my name that he had taken out months earlier, forging my signature. There, lying in that hospital bed, with 60% of my body covered in burns and scars, I understood that I had been born again. The fire that should have killed me ended up being the start of a new life, one in which I would use my mother's ancestral knowledge, not just to heal myself, but to help others who went through the same suffering. The herbs that saved my skin began to spark interest in the doctors themselves, who watched in wonder at a recovery they didn't believe possible. But hold on, before going straight to the end, I have to start this story from the beginning of my life so you understand how I ended up in that situation, and mainly, how I managed to survive. We only understand the present when we know the past, as my late mother used to say. And my past, my son, has more twists than the Colorado River, winding through this Arizona land. I was born in Sedona, in the year 1945, when these parts didn't even dream of asphalt or electric light properly. My father, Joseph Miller, was a ranch hand, one of those strong and silent men who spent weeks driving cattle and loaded mules through the trails of the high desert, taking what was produced in the backcountry to Flagstaff and bringing back what came from outside. A hard man, a few words and many calluses on his hands, but he had gentle eyes when he looked at my mother and me, the only daughter who survived after 5 who were born dead. My mother, Hazel, she was a woman to take your hat off to, a midwife of great skill, one of those who brought children into the world solely with the wisdom she inherited from her mother, who in turn learned from her grandmother. They said in the region that Hazel Smith's hands were blessed, that she had never lost a laboring mother or a baby when called in time. She knew every herb of the desert by smell, by the shape of the leaf, by the bitter or sweet taste. She knew which was good for fever, which stopped bleeding, which brought down a girl's delayed period, which healed wounds that didn't heal with pharmacy medicine. Our house was simple, adobe, low roof, beaten earth floor, but it had a huge backyard where my mother cultivated her medicinal herbs. I grew up there, among the rosemary, the rue, the lemongrass, the fennel, the basil. Since I was tiny, around 7 years old, I already helped her harvest, dry, and prepare the remedies. While other girls my age played with dolls, I learned the difference between the leaf that cures and the one that kills, between the root that lowers fever and the one that induces vomiting. Margaret. My mother always said while she macerated some herb in the wooden mortar my father had made for her, "Pay attention to what I'm doing. One day you're going to need this." And I paid attention with that curiosity of a child who doesn't quite understand the importance of what she's learning, but absorbs everything like a sponge. I learned to recognize each plant, not just by appearance, but by smell, by texture, by the time of year it bloomed best. I learned that some should only be harvested at the full moon, others at the waning moon, that some work better fresh, others need to be dried in the shade. One of my mother's specialties was precisely burns. Back then, with wood stoves, kerosene lamps, bonfires for making soap or roasting coffee, accidents were common. Now and then, someone would arrive desperate, with singed skin, looking for help. I remember like it was today the first time I saw my mother treat a severe burn. I must have been about 8 years old. They brought a man who had fallen into a vat of boiling molasses. Half his body looked like raw meat, truly raw flesh. The smell was horrible, and the screams of pain even more so. My mother wasn't shaken. She told everyone to leave the room, except me. "Stay here and pay attention, because one day you might need to do this," she said with that calm that only someone who has seen everything in life possesses. I saw her clean the wounds with an infusion of mesquite bark and sage leaves. Then she applied a thick paste made of aloe vera, grated prickly pear, jojoba oil, and other herbs she had gathered at dawn with the dew still on them. On top, banana leaves or broad corn husks to keep it moist and cool. The man, who arrived almost dying, walked out after 3 weeks of treatment. He was left with scars, of course, but he saved his life and his limbs, which the town doctor had said would need to be amputated. School was a luxury I barely knew. I learned to read and write with a teacher who came to give private lessons at home once a week, paid with chickens and eggs my mother offered in exchange. But my true education was there, in the herbal garden, accompanying my mother in births, treatments, and blessings. Knowledge that doesn't come in any book, that is only learned by doing, seeing, touching, smelling. At 16, I was already known in the region as the midwife's daughter, and they already called me to help when my mother was busy with another case. It was around this time I met James, my first husband. He appeared at our house one day, bringing his younger sister, who was in complicated labor. He was 26, handsome in a rough way, worked with cattle on a nearby ranch. He looked at me in a way that made me blush to the roots of my hair. After that day, he started showing up frequently, always with some excuse. He had a headache and needed a remedy. He had hurt his finger and wanted a bandage. He brought a chicken as a gift, a pumpkin from the field, a piece of honeycomb. My father didn't like him. He said he had the eyes of a snake, the kind you don't trust. But I, a fool, was enchanted. At that age, we confused desire with love, attention with true care. We married in less than 6 months of dating, a simple ceremony at the Church of St. Joseph, right there in Sedona. I moved to his house, a shack even simpler than my parents', at the back of the ranch where he worked. It was there I met the real James. The charm lasted less than the honeymoon. In the first month, the screaming started. In the second, the shoving. In the third, the first slap across the face. I tried to go back to my parents' house, but my father, with that old mentality, said a married woman only leaves home as a widow. My mother, more sensitive, gave me herbs to hide in his food to calm his nerves. It worked for a few days, then everything returned. The drinking made things worse. On weekends, when he got his pay, he spent half at the saloon before getting home. And then, God forbid and protect me, it was praying for him to pass out drunk before finding me. 3 years I lived in this hell. 3 years of constant fear, of bruises hidden under long sleeves, of flimsy excuses for indiscreet questions about black eyes or a split lip. I never got pregnant during that time, and today I thank God for that. What fate would a child born in that environment have? My mother said it was because I secretly drank the rue tea she taught me, but I really think it was divine protection. The end of this marriage came tragically, but I confess it brought relief. On a night of heavy drinking, riding back from the bar on his horse, James fell into a ravine. Horse and rider rolled down the embankment. The animal survived with a few scratches. My husband didn't. He broke his neck in the fall. When they came to give me the news, I felt a mixture of shock and liberation that gives me a guilty conscience to this day. I don't wish evil on anyone, but that night I slept in peace for the first time in 3 years. It is a heavy, complex emotion to process, but let's be honest, sometimes survival feels a lot like relief. This tragic twist of fate didn't just end a nightmare. It cleared the path for Margaret to return to her roots, mastering the very skills that will save her life years down the road. I went back to my parents' house, now as a respected widow and not a runaway wife. I resumed learning with my mother, who continued teaching me everything she knew about medicinal herbs, births, cures. Her knowledge seemed endless. Every plant, every root, every tree bark had a purpose, a right way to be prepared, a right time to be gathered. Everything in nature has its time and place, Margaret, she always said. The same plant that cures can kill if used at the wrong time or in the wrong way. 2 years after returning to my parents' house, I met Robert. He was the owner of a small general store in town, a widower, 20 years older than me, with a grown son who lived in Phoenix. It wasn't love at first sight like with James. It was something that grew slowly, based on mutual respect and affinity. He came to buy medicinal herbs from my mother to resell in the store, and we always talked a little. One day he invited me for coffee in the plaza, then to Sunday Mass, then to have lunch at his house. Robert was the opposite of James in everything. Gentle, polite, hard-working. He never raised his voice at me, much less his hand. When he asked me to marry him 6 months later, I was afraid. The first marriage had left scars on my soul deeper than any burn. But my mother, wise as always, said, "Daughter, not every man is the same. This one has the look of a good person. Give him a chance, and yourself too." We married on a Sunday morning, in the same church where I had married James years before. The ceremony was small but beautiful. Robert had saved up to throw a modest party, with cake, soda, and even a country band playing fiddle for us to dance. It was the first time I felt truly happy in many years, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I moved into his house, a simple 2-story, but well-kept, behind the store. There we started our life together. In the first months, I continued helping my mother with births and treatments, but gradually I got more involved with the business. I had a knack for it, I discovered. I knew how to deal with customers, negotiate with suppliers, keep the accounts up to date. Robert jokingly said I was born to be a merchant, not a healer. 1 year